Hi all, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over some of the week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. One rule, we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's make sure to be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I am the Managing Director at Sino-Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I read a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, and good evening from my side. My name is Lei, and I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. I've spent pretty much the last 20 years, except the last 18 months, on the ground in China, covering the industry. I'm now in the U.S. as an independent analyst consultant, still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. This week is episode number 25. Yeah!
That's like half a year, right?
So it's a quarter century, right? We are talking about BYD's Coolant-GATE versus Dongchedi. Where's the truth? We may never find out. Huawei's exec canned for saying Tesla kills people. And CATL's sodium-ion battery, for show or for dough, and more. Maybe we start with the sodium-ion battery, shall we?
Sure, yeah. I'll let you start. I'm not a very technical guy, so...
Right. It was rather technical, and I was looking for some background info. And you know what an interesting story is? The interesting story is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the novel by Jules Verne. There was a exchange in that story about sodium batteries. And this is like 100 years ago, right? So sodium-ion batteries, I guess, it's not something new. It's been around. It works similarly to the lithium-ion battery, where the ions, go back and forth through the membrane and the electrolytes,
right,
through the anode and the cathode, right? So it's a similar chemistry, except it's using a different element. And I guess it's been around, except it hasn't been used much on EVs. It's been used on energy storage.
Right.
So I guess for CATL to announce this, it's new, but it's not new. And the interesting thing for CATL is go check out their website. It's completely refreshed. In their description, company profile, it says this. It's got a very good English section, by the way, and the English press release is also out for the sodium-ion battery.
They're big time now. They need an English website.
Yeah, and it says CATL is a global leader of new energy innovative technologies, committed to providing premier solutions and services for new energy applications worldwide. Before, it was CATL is a global leader of lithium-ion battery research and manufacturing company. So it's a huge change, I think, right? So they're moving away from a kind of a battery supplier to something bigger.
Right. So broaden their appeal.
Yeah. So, I tweeted out kind of the killing 4 birds with one stone. What they're trying to achieve is obviously sodium being the element right next to lithium. If you look at the table of elements, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's number 3. It's number 2 before lithium, which is number 3 or something. Cost is obviously a huge component because sodium is all over the world. Whereas China imports about 70% of the lithium. Right. I get my number right. And the price comparison is sodium is 2 renminbi per kilogram, whereas lithium is 150 renminbi per kilogram. So the cost issue is obviously is huge. And I think CATL is also, they say innovation, but it's all about chemistry, right?
Yeah.
And during the press conference.
And scale.
So Robin Zeng was at the press conference, and he said, there's some people said chemistry is done, right? You can only innovate through, this CTP, cell to pack, cell to chassis. But he says there's a lot to be done in the chemistry part of it.
Sure.
And I guess, the advantages of the sodium ion, it sacrifices energy density for charging speed, for 90% retaining the discharge retention rate, and also, charging faster at lower temperatures and efficiency, the system integration efficiency. So if you remember our last episode, someone asked about the sodium ion. And what I said the last episode was, this is still something in the early stages of it. So I said it's for show rather than for dough. What they said was kind of realize the industrial chain by 2023. But I think that's still far from the status of LFPs and NMCs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're still, at least I think several years, if not by the middle of the decade, to see this, mass on a mass scale.
Yeah, so
that's
what you're
my
saying
take.
so what you're saying is there's basically some competing technologies in the battery cell sector, whether it's solid state, whether it's sodium ion, that will probably hit up or bump up against each other from a timing standpoint. So QuantumScape this week also issued their earnings, and they're not making any revenue, but their share price bumped up because they've they've increased their amount of R&D spend. So I think the street thought that was good news, but what we'll see, because also this week the U.S. government has gotten closer to finally turning the infrastructure bill, a much smaller infrastructure bill, by the way, into a law. And the EV portion of the funding is going to be, if I'm listening to the news correctly, going through a different route. And so I think this infrastructure bill had small spending or subsidies for EVs, but the next bill is going to be much larger. And LFP is going to be the way to go. For the most part, I think you're going to see a lot of capacity increase in the United States for LFP.
And Elon Musk said during the earnings call that he expects 2/3 of EVs will be LFPs and the remaining NMCs, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and the need for new technologies and cutting edge technologies is to bring costs down, and from each country's standpoint, there's the memory of relying on a region that's sometimes unstable for energy, right? And that's the Middle East with oil. So I think from a government standpoint, their priority is to try to be as independent as possible. But to your point, if China owns the copper mines in Chile or whatever, that creates a national security issue. So LFP is also the way to kind of mitigate some of that concern at the government level. But once that infrastructure bill gets approved, we're going to see a mad scramble. We're going to see forward contracts for some of these main raw materials or rare earth metals, because everyone's trying to secure it for their future, right? But so a QuantumScape, a CATL, if they're able to also develop and commercialize alternate types of batteries, then that could be a huge win for them, right? Because they've already have 30-40% of all EV customers in the world as their customer. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because the other thing too is to remind folks that the CEO, what's his name? The CEO of CATL, a few weeks ago, I don't know if he's still the higher ranked, but he passed Jack Ma as in 27th and 28th most richest person in the world. So,
I just checked the latest Bloomberg billionaire index. So Robin Zeng is number 27 at 49.6 billion. And guess who's behind him?
is it Jack Ma?
Yes, at
Yeah.
47.8 billion. So
Yeah. So, and there's a decent chance that Jack Ma is going to fall farther down that billionaire index. So let's talk BYD. Let's talk this Coolant-GATE.
Yeah. I just want to add a couple of more points on this sodium ion battery. I forgot to mention that part of it has to do with, the industry has learned over the past year of the chip shortage problem. So people are hedging against something similar happening to batteries.
Yes.
So
for sure.
CATL's move is obviously, avoiding being constrained by a certain material, right? So, whether it's cobalt, whether it's lithium, whether it's something else. So that was one of the intentions, I think, for the sodium
Right.
ion battery. As a consequence, their market cap went up and the net worth of Robin Zeng went up. So
And CATL, if we're being 100% honest, they're trying to be as apolitical as they can be, right? Because they do have investments for expansion in the EU, and they are probably looking at opportunities in the North American region, right? Whether it's Mexico or the United States or Canada. If they're going to maintain their dominance, they will need to build local capacity. And there's always going to be a little bit of that hanging over their head. And we could be seeing 5 years from now or 7 years from now a complete 180-degree turn from too much demand, not enough supply, to too much supply, not enough demand. And we've seen it in the past in China with solar panels. We've seen it with steel, where overcapacity becomes a huge issue. Now, the passenger vehicle market in China, there's a ton of overcapacity that you never hear about because the SOEs have it on their books, but it's not very healthy. And you would hope that, and this is not happening because we saw this week that Xpeng was looking at adding another factory. So you would hope that some of them would be able to subsidize or buy old factories and rehab them or update them. But it just looks like we're adding capacity to the system here in China. And that puts a lot of pressure on these companies to export that supply if the domestic demand never shows up, which is high probability because we also see the EU and the United States adding capacity as well. So anyways, we're kind of getting off the topic with CATL stuff, but these are all things that really need to be considered when you're looking at EV companies, battery companies, and the supporting sectors that in the mobility space. So let's talk BYD and Coolant-GATE.
yeah, actually the CATL, Robin Zeng actually, he says something about there's a lot you can do on chemistry rather than physical structure or the physics of it, right? The mechanical part of it, which is what BYD has done with the blade and the CTP, right? CATL also has a CTP, but so this kind of goes into, what happened with the BYD Han and Media. They have this special program where they randomly select two different kind of EVs and just go through a 50% off center collision test.
Lei, can I ask you a quick question
Yeah.
and then you can continue?
Sure.
Is this company, it's a third party, right? Is it kind of sort of like a Consumer's Reports? Or this is where I'm a little bit confused
that's where
who they
I
are.
was getting to. This Dongche Di, which is a sort of a new media under ByteDance, okay? But it's still media. So they have this Dongche collision or vehicle test program, right? They've been doing this for weeks. And I think it seems that they're trying to be the kind of Consumer Reports of China, but there's not really such thing, at least not yet in China, because it's kind of blurred, right? When you talk about Consumer Reports, it is a media, but right?
Yeah.
But it also has its, testing rankings, right? But in China, the way media operates, there's always conflict of interest,
Of
and
course
trying
there's.
to be impartial, trying to be fair, is always a problem. So what happened is this collision test was done at a 50% off center at 64 kilometers per hour, which is not it's not what other
64 kilometers an hour is about 35 miles an hour.
yeah, so it's not what other institutions are doing, whether it's 50% off center or the speed at which they're doing it. So basically, the collision was done, and the Han EV, after 48 hours sitting there, apparently caught fire. So BYD came out with a statement saying somehow the battery coolant, leaked and caused the fire. That was from the statement. Another part of the statement was, at the very end, it said, if other media or press continue to report on this, well, we're going to do something about it, which I thought was,
Yeah,
right?
it's
So, but
yeah, that's like daring somebody to do deep dive investigation, right?
yeah, so at the same time, I question, that as a media that does this sort of collision tests, some say, it costs about 3 million RMB to do something like this per event.
Hmm.
Obviously, you need to have money, right?
Yeah.
But where's the impartial and fairness in doing this, even though it's trying to be impartial and fair? Being a media company, right? Being a media platform. But on the other hand, I thought BYD's statement was weak in concluding that it was the coolant. And when afterwards owners reported, the colors of the coolant supposed to be
Yeah.
purple, not red, but it's
Hmm.
arbitrary. And some owners reported saying, it's red, and it's not really red, it's not purple. So all of this right now, it's stuck. We don't have a verdict. Similar to look at the Tesla brake gate.
Yeah.
3 months
Hmm.
ago, we still don't have a verdict at the Shanghai Auto Show. They're still fighting over it. So this is probably going to go on for a while without a conclusion.
Well,
He said, she said again.
there's gonna be a lot more finger pointing going on, right? And
Yeah. So
there's gonna be the stands and the fudsters that are gonna either try to simulate or
so I think the moral of the story is, in China, whether you're a Chinese company, whether you're a foreign company, you need to be ready in terms of PR. And I don't know, BYD was, in the way the statement was put out in concluding the coolant. Was it premature? I don't know. But you need to be ready, kind of PR wise, and what you say in response to
but
these
that's
type
the
of,
thing.
yeah,
That's the thing, though, right? They're not used to it, right? They
right.
they are used to Neo, Xpeng,
Well,
Tesla. Those guys kind of sucking the air out of the
the
room. So,
the next could very well be Neo or Xpeng, the next victim,
oh,
and you need to be ready. That's what I'm saying. But
yeah,
the way this has gone, I didn't like either, the media part of it and also the BYD statement, because it could backfire,
hmm.
if you say something that's could be proven wrong later for both sides.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, Lei, they had posted a lot of videos saying that their Blade battery was so bulletproof, right? And
Well,
so they
yeah,
they leaned into that. They leaned into that, and then we can dispute separately whether this media outlet that posts on TikTok is legit or not. But if you're going to lean into that type of marketing and make those types of claims, why did you not realize or understand that somebody's probably going to come after you because of that, right?
I don't think that the collision test was FUDing BYD intentionally. Okay,
I don't think so either.
right, but this event made it all the more interesting and more headline worthy, was exactly because, one, Han EV has been one of the best selling models with over 10,000 units a month, several months
Yeah,
now,
that's
right?
been a bright spot for BYD.
Yeah, that's number one. And number two, BYD chairman Wang Chuanfu having said earlier in the year that we're going to erase EVs catching on fire from the vocabulary. Okay, a big statement. And now this happens. So that's why they have to put this fire out, literally and figuratively. Yeah.
So here's the calculus. Okay. So by 2025, there's a forecast made that by 2025, there are going to be 30 million cars sold in China alone. So currently, I believe globally, there are about 10 million EVs on the roads currently. Once the EU leans in a bit further, that their run rates are around 15 million cars a year. The United States, about 18, 17 million cars a year. We're going to have 100 million EVs within the next 3 or 4 years on the road. So the battery fires are going to happen just because the number of vehicles will substantially increase within the next 5 years. Now, which also means that the scenarios for the accidents are going to increase substantially. So when you're doing crash testing, you're only looking at the accident use case or the use cases under the normal distribution curve, right? So the edge cases, there's always going to be opportunities or a risk of a fire because some guy was driving it in the middle of nowhere and they didn't account for that at BYD or at Tesla. But this is just to say that we're eliminating battery fires. That's a pretty bold statement. And, I seeing what happened today to Trevor or yesterday to Trevor Milton, I'd be very, very careful as to what I'm saying to the public. But
yeah, another perspective is if I were the owner of this Han EV and I was actually in an accident, just as it happened as the collision test. The good thing is, I guess I could walk away hopefully without injuries and without it catching on fire immediately, right? Because currently there's specific regulations and policies in place saying what happens during for a battery. I think the law is it's not supposed to catch fire within 5 minutes, something similar to that. But so I guess, in that sense, hey, it's safe. But whatever happened 48 hours after, if I was the owner, my car is totaled, I wouldn't be in it, right? That's another argument.
Sure.
But so there's good and the bad. So
and who knows what this media company, where they parked it, what they did with it in that 48 hours, right? And the fact of the matter is, at least it's not like GM with the Bolt where they're like, yeah, don't park it in your garage. That's pretty.
My stance is with the exception of maybe Consumer Reports here in the U.S. I never liked a media platform doing these type of testings. There's a bunch of others that do disassemblies, like Monroe, right? Monroe Associates, but they're different. I just don't think, in China at least, there's for media doing this, it's just so much conflict of interest. When you conclude, okay, this car was bad or that car was bad, it's bound to go into this argument that will never end.
Yeah, well, just to your point, right? They had to say something quickly or it would have just went viral. In China, things go viral very quickly.
Yeah. Then again, I'm sure in a couple of days, there'll be another different blockbuster story that will save BYD. Oh, you can bet on that. And this will boil over and we're all good. That's,
Yeah, well, they're betting the company's future on it because they've announced, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, they're moving the entire EV lineup over to the Blade battery. So they feel very confident that it's safe, economical, and profitable. So if there's an engineering flaw or design flaw, then, man, that's going to be pretty significant hit to their product planning. But we're talking about PR, we're talking about comments to the public. So let's move over to this Huawei executive who said essentially Tesla builds cars that kill people. That's a pretty bold statement. So what did you read about this? What did you hear about this?
Yeah, I guess this week's topic is all about commenting on people making the wrong comments or saying the truth for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Because this guy was bluntly saying the truth. Well, that's one way to look at it, right? Except it was a bit too much
still
to some people, right?
Pretty controversial. To me, it was controversial.
The way he said it was, from it's hard to translate exactly, from the Chinese, but basically he said something to the effect of from the first death that Tesla caused, right? I think that was the guy from the Model S.
Yes.
Went through the truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the most recent killing event. Basically, that's the kind of the translation. He says, Tesla.
I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to laugh.
No, but this guy, this guy is known. This is not the first time he's made provocative comments, and the media would love this because they can come out with all these headlines. Tesla kills people. The media would love this kind of, executive making these type of comments. I think he also said something that L5 would never happen, would never ever happen. L5 meaning autonomous vehicles anywhere, anytime, any condition. He said he wouldn't happen this lifetime. It would never happen. It's something he said earlier in the year. But I think this is also interesting because this happens at a time for Huawei, which is transitioning from its previous kind of positioning, smartphone, their 5G network.
Yeah.
Almost completely to smart EVs, LiDARs, right? Selling ArcFox in their showrooms. And Richard Yu, right, is now the head of the CEO of the Intelligence Automotive Solutions unit, right?
Yep.
So this is like a big transition for them. And
this week they also announced a premium EV brand with GAC Ion, right?
Yeah.
So they are all in, but I'm old school, poking bears and not being humble.
So I guess this guy, he's removed from the position, but not the company. So he's going to be in some sort of strategic reserve for training. He's going to get some more training and maybe go take up another position. But from that vantage, you also see the organizational structure and how the company operates. In fact, that they have this strategic reserve for people who might be, doing something wrong, and then, you get training. And
with their pivot this year to smart EVs, I'm sure there are executives there that got whiplash, that were once when they were a strong communications, mobile phone manufacturer, router, and manufacturer. There's probably a set of executives that were going to take over, but now that they pivoted to EVs, there's probably a different set, and there's probably internal politics that are like really, really trying to take on leadership roles in this new entity that effectively they've created a new entity, right? And they've made a lot of headway with announcements and partnerships, but the proof is in the pudding, and they're going to have to compete against 3, 4, 5 companies that are strong and have spent more time in this space than Huawei has. So I'm sure Tesla called them and said, this guy needs to be fired. And rather than fire him, maybe that was the compromise between Tesla and Huawei, right?
Yeah. So it's just yeah.
And this is like also, and we might as well talk about this because I'd mentioned this earlier. Trevor Milton is now indicted. So Trevor Milton, for those that don't know, was the CEO, founder of Nikola EVs, and they're not EVs, but they were announced a truck, and Trevor was the CEO, and he made some really, really bold claims. Hindenburg Research, a research firm that specializes in shorting stocks and companies, came out with a huge report that made all these accusations, one of them being that the vehicles in some of the videos and commercials didn't actually run, didn't actually work. And in one video, they actually filmed a truck or a semi rolling downhill. So it wasn't actually even turned on and using its own power. It was rolling downhill in order to make this commercial or video for investors. And so in the United States, I guess the comments he made were egregious enough to the investors that they've indicted him. So I think there will be another few companies and some ex-executives in the United States, perhaps. I don't know. Does that normally, can you think of anything in China that's happened like that, Lei, where I can't think of anything, because you would think that, Luckin or a couple of these other companies' executives would have been indicted or thrown in jail, but I can't think of anything in the recent past that's happened like that.
Yeah, Luckin, along with Car Inc., UCar,
but
will probably.
But nobody's in jail, right?
No, not that we know
of. Yeah, it's fair warning to some of these other P.T. Barnum-like CEOs. I saw on Twitter, there were some memes about Tesla and Elon, why he is not in trouble for some of the things that he says. So in the age of social media, you just need to stay in the news, I guess, right?
Yeah, sometimes, the way I look at this is you see a lot of bold statements. We talked about, it might be the wrong comparison, but, Wang Chuanfu saying, it'll never happen, catching on fire, whatever metrics that people use, right? Bold targets. And then for this guy to say Tesla kills people, it's too blunt, but in a certain way, it's true, right? I mean, we're all follow the industry and see what happened. But the quite a few accidents. I mean, the conclusion from the investigation was that Tesla was not at fault, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if I was Tesla, of course, this guy, you're wrong. You can't say this about us, right?
It's also that the PR issuing a statement, the Tesla PR issuing a statement, that's also very Silicon Valley. So I think that's kind of a playbook out of Silicon Valley, where they're like, oh man, you need to fire this guy, or this guy needs, we're going to sue you and stuff like that. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.